All right. So, even though things have not gone as smoothly as I hoped, I still wanted to keep this this meeting date because I think we can work through some of the things. You know, just in glancing through what Katie sent about an hour ago, excuse me, you know, the overview is that testing, funding, respect, too much paperwork, lack of counselors, expectations in the classroom beyond teaching, and are major overall themes with all of them that were sent in. So you guys have had a little time to look through your regions, your zone and your region. Is that a fair statement of what you found?
It is for me.
Okay. Remember, you have to unmute yourself, I think, in order to talk.
I would say yes.
This is J. Paul, and yes as well.
Okay. So if we're going to look at these, let's try and see where those issues come from. Are they state mandates? Are they federal mandates? Or is it a local issue, like fire drills? You know, the state requires so many fire drills a year, but some districts do one every month, right? So that is a state mandate, but it is a local decision that takes away time from the classroom. So that's what we kind of have to drill down on. So if we're looking at testing, what do you think? Is that a state, federal, a combination of the two?
Alicia, what does the new ESEA law say about testing? Does it change anything?
An NEA webinar next week about that.
In fact, we're going to be on an NEA webinar tomorrow night discussing that. There is still testing in ESSA.
Amy, this is Catherine. One of the things that it does allow is that states, so much of the testing is going to be put back to the state level, but one of the things that it does allow is that if a state would choose for, especially high school, to go to the ACT. So things that we've been talking about. It still keeps the 3rd through 8th grade federal mandates as they were, so those stay the same.
But the high stakes pieces with the waiver that were related to the waiver are gone and become a state decision.
And it also reads that if a school, you know how with AYP, if a school failed, then it went through all these different steps, and basically it just says if you fail, you're going to write a plan to do more, to do better. So there's the punitive pieces have been taken out of it, as far as we can tell. Now, it doesn't mean that our state couldn't continue those high stakes piece. So,
right, because right now our testing, our evaluations have that tie as well as A through F. So unless graduation requirements, things like that. So unless there's a change in the state, then we still have those pieces.
So
So we need to identify those state legislative mandates that could be changed.
So, yeah, so we need to identify, that's what David was saying if you couldn't hear him, that we need to identify those state mandates that we might need to change, like TLE, A through F.
Okay, so
What are some
those
others?
state mandates you mentioned, people in my area, the consensus was that TLE is good. It's an improvement over what we were doing before. They'd rather that they put resources behind it since we've invested so much time in learning it and training for it. The problems that we have with TLE aren't the idea or the concept behind it, or there are other mandates, like related to professional development, that they feel are worthy. It's not that it's a state mandate that we don't have money for. It's more like, we're not asking for this to go away. We need money for it.
Right, so I was referring specifically to the quantitative side, not the qualitative side. The piece of TLE that specifically ties in test scores, which
Yeah,
is what
that
is
could go
driving.
away, definitely. There's no one I know who's defending it and thinks it's great except some lady up in Tulsa. But in the meantime, what the concern is, well, if we throw out the quantitative, we're going to throw out the rest of the TLE because they like that.
So they feel that the qualitative and what's their observations, classroom observation and feedback is good. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Exactly,
Okay.
And it has improved the game, and they feel like they're having better professional conversations with colleagues, et cetera.
Okay, what other mandates are driving the testing?
What about RSA?
RSA?
Or do you want to say third grade reading test?
Because RSA is a lot more.
Because RSA is helping getting kids
I think third grade reading tests myself.
Would you consider the ACE, passing 4 out of 7 EOIs to graduate as part of those that are problematic?
I wrote that down.
Okay.
Earlier discussion.
I don't know how much a cost we associate with that, although we're opposed to it because of what it does. But certainly the required EOIs are a problem. I mean, there are costs related to that. I think everyone I spoke to as well wants them to go over to the ACT model.
That's good.
So I have a question. If we went over to the ACT model, would teachers still be in favor of having to pass those in order to graduate, still keep it high stakes, or is the essence just to replace the EOIs with the ACT?
This is Elise again. I don't think any of the teachers are in favor of any high stakes for the students. The results of the ACT serve us in informing our way of planning our instruction. It can be used as an evaluation on whether or not we're doing the right thing.
This is Amy. I was going to say the same thing. If we can get away with all the high stakes together, I think that's what we would really love to do. But of course, I don't know how much the business community is tied to that.
It might help if we conveyed the message that what they're doing is punishing students while they think they're punishing teachers or they're getting even with teachers or something. What they're really doing is harming students and sucking instructional time away.
All right, any other mandates that you can think of that go with testing? If not, let's move to funding.
Before we leave the testing one, let me ask a question. Clearly, the federal government's driving a lot of the testing, but beyond that, there are some state mandates in testing. But beyond that, as I read those surveys that you did, the conversations that you had, it seemed that there are some districts that have even gone beyond what's required by the state and the federal government. So we've now had the first round of 3%, annualized, actually it's 6% for the rest of the year, cuts going to local districts. That may have and I would anticipate more next year with the shortfall we've got in the government, in funding state government. So that may impact those locally mandated tests going forward. Are there specific tests that you can identify that are locally mandated tests that are costing time and money that you can identify that we ought to push toward having those cut?
This is Elise. In Moore, we have benchmark tests. I think, Amy can correct me, but I think it's after second grade. But at any rate, certainly at the secondary level, benchmark tests that are quarterly, we calculated it out. We've got a loss of 16 instructional days to test prep, test taking, and a huge expense related to the paper involved in these tests and the copy usage and wear and tear and the time spent on them. But then a further weight on teachers' shoulders because they have to score them, and not all of them are Scantronable. And they then have a separate reporting form, which is really just a spreadsheet that's very time-consuming for the department chairs. And then they use it to compare across schools, and it ends up feeling like this punishment. Then we're spending district money pulling teachers together constantly to review and revise those district benchmarks, which the teachers wrote, the teachers designed. They've been around for like 18 years or 16 years. And it's a huge waste of time because there are a bunch of teachers, unfortunately, and it is the teachers, gaming it, where they report false numbers, they let the kids do the test with all the notes in front of them. I know one who put the answers to certain hard questions up on the board, and it's just a complete waste of time. We've asked on 2 occasions in the formal setting to have the district stop, just agree to stop doing the benchmark testing. Just right now, you want to save money? Here you go, save this. And so far, they're very reticent to do so. They acknowledge everything we tell them, and yet they're not willing to give up the district benchmark test.
At the elementary level, it's the whole RTI process that's killing our teachers because it's kind of, we do our benchmark tests also, but then in Dibbles, we have to progress monitor the kids once a week. You have to spend like 30 extra minutes a week with individual kids for remediation, and it's just a nightmare. That's what's killing the teachers. I mean, they know which kids need help automatically. They don't need to waste extra time doing all these progress monitoring tests, but I know in Moore it's really a hard thing for the teachers to do and administrators, because once a month we all have to take a whole day just to meet with all of our teams of teachers, and not that we don't want to, but it's just, I don't know, it's just kind of awkward and forced, and not a lot I think comes out of it.
Jenny?
Yeah.
How about Mustang?
We do benchmark testing starting in kindergarten, and I'm with the person with RTI. When you put the benchmark testing with RTI, I'm losing a lot of valuable time because I'm spending 80 minutes a day with 8 different children because of RTI. That's individual. I mean, it's a lot of time. because we do the AIMS also. We do, that's like the DIBELS. We do benchmark testing, AIMS, report card testing, RTI testing, and you have to meet twice a month with your team on that. It's a lot of time. And that's it starts in kindergarten in Mustang.
All right, J. Paul, how about McAllister?
According to the individual core areas, they handle it internally. The district has not mandated anything other than say, okay, we'd like to have benchmarks. You guys work it internal. We're small enough that we, typically like for U.S. history, we've got one AP teacher and then two who are teaching regular. And so they just internally handle it, but it still is a time consumer with obviously limited actual usefulness in the sense of being able to actually go back. That still is inherently a problem, that we're pushed to a timeline that says, like right now, I just was looking through how many more sections do I have to teach before spring break, because I have to be done by spring break so I can start the review, and then reviewing all my review materials, making sure that they're in place with the sense that, again, we're just pushing towards a test as opposed to really trying to have kids holistically understand the material as opposed to looking at specific content standards and just trying to make sure that they've got those with perhaps not the integration that you'd like to see.
Thank you. I was just taking a couple of notes. That's why there's a lag time. Any other thoughts on the testing issue?
I think going back to just simply our discussions last spring and just, again, the usefulness of the testing, and does it actually provide us with real information that allows us to go ahead and to change teaching. It still feels like we're pushing strictly to a summative environment instead of a formative environment. On multiple different levels, we can say this feels wasteful compared to what we would really like to be doing in the classroom. And the real point still is, it looks to me like we're being forced to look at questions that don't provide us with useful information, but it fits their models.
So these benchmarks that should be formative, that should inform your instruction and what your students should know and are able to do, what I'm hearing is they're really not providing you with that information that you need.
Again, our formatives are built strictly on trying to look at the content standards.
Yeah.
So that it forces us to specific items, and they're all valuable items. There's no doubt about that. But it's still problematic relative to, again, pacing, trying to make sure that they understand holistically how do these things tie together as opposed to making them more discrete bits of information. Does that make any sense?
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So we want to go through this process with all those key pieces that we came up with. And since there are only 4 of you on the phone, I'm going to put it to you. Do you want to let me give you the list again and you think through it and then send in your ideas by next Monday? Or do you want to flesh out as much as we can in the next 25 minutes?
You sent those to us in an email, right?
No, because we just got the all the data from Katie. So I can send them
So what items is it you would give us?
So testing, which we just went over, funding, excessive paperwork, lack of counselors, expectations beyond teaching, and lack of respect.
So there are a couple of those that fall back on the, it's not that we want them to change anything, they just need to give us some money. You know, the lack of counselors is a money question. And so, I mean, while we can heighten their awareness of the issue, and we could probably throw in school nurses and the difficulty finding OTs and PTs and speech therapists, unless they're going to give us some money, there's really not a mandate that they can take away that would improve that.
Right, but can we drill down in funding and come up with mandates that require us to pay for things that, you know, might be unnecessary for a district, or if we didn't have to do this mandate, we might be able to do this instead?
This is Jay Paul again. On funding, it still seems to me that it's not so much that if we were to indicate the legislation that we think is hindering us, it would be, again, giving away tax bases. And so, unfortunately, I'm not sure. They already have come back and supposedly freed us from the onerous mandates that essentially were all the reforms that we thought 1017 brought us. I mean, they basically vindicated those are problematic. So unfortunately, in this one area, it seems as if the problem is they are saying, they're rationale, we're going to not require you to do certain things. And the funding issues that I hear are the lack of funding, not that we're being forced to spend money that we don't have. At least the people who gave me feedback, their primary concern was the lack of funding, not that they were being forced to spend what little money they had. Now, I could go back and talk to the superintendent and get a better feeling on that specific issue, but at least on funding, it's as if we basically are saying funding problems are not because we're being forced to spend money, but because we don't have money at all on a whole group of areas.
True. So with the small pot of money that we had, if they didn't have the TLE requirement that causes the district to have to buy computer equipment, extra administrators to make sure they can get all the observations in, all the infrastructure to upload all that data to the State Department, you know, and all of those things that take away from the small pot of money. You know, again, we can go back to the ACE requirements for EOI tests and what those cost the district. So,
okay, administering EOI tests is a huge real expense that flows from a mandate for which there is no funding. And the fact that they've attached high stakes to it is, you know, the bloody sauce they've added to it. But, you know, when you talk about technology, the fact that they're mandating them to do tests that must be done on the computer, so we have to have this huge push to have computers everywhere, and they have to be completely up to date, and they have to be re-imaged to match the new program that they just came through. The thing is, we've already spent a lot of that money. Most of the schools are, okay, we bit that bullet. Now, it's true there's an additional cost there every single year because you've got all kinds of maintenance that is huge. So, again, if they were to take away the EOI tests that have to be done on the computer, that would be a savings, a definite savings directly to the district that wouldn't cost the state any money, and it really wouldn't be that huge of a loss for anybody. And if you talk about, like, to the issue, the biggest unfunded mandates that we have are related to federal mandates, special ed type things, for which there's never been any money, and our state certainly isn't going to start putting the money in. And I don't think anybody is saying that we shouldn't be serving the needs of the special needs students. So there's this, that's the massive chunk that is really irritating to administrators on that end. I wish that, and I don't know of an equitable way of doing it because rural versus suburban versus poverty area versus urban area versus whatever, that it would be nice if there was some sort of requirement of proportionality between money spent on administration and money spent actually in the classroom. You know, but again, that could end up being punitive to some districts in a way that we wouldn't want to be.
Well, and the way that they have moved around who is administrative cost and who isn't is not in the favor of, I mean, like librarians are moved into administrative cost. Counselors have been moved into administrative costs because they're not direct classroom teachers. So we really have to be careful.
Well, when we talk about not having enough counselors, okay?
Yes.
Which is a very real issue. I believe the National Counseling Association recommends a ratio of 250 students per counselor, and I don't think anybody's got that, unless they have less than 250 students in their district, you know. And the fact is that the people administering a lot of these tests are counselors. You would free them up to be true counselors if they didn't have to deal with the testing. So again, we keep coming back to that testing piece is a huge way to save.
Yeah. So that was good tying lack of counselors back into the mandate for testing.
Yeah, I do think we should fight for media specialists to be counted as teachers because they are.
I agree.
Yeah, and you know, if you think back, it's kind of it kind of goes back and forth because there was a time where they counted everybody in the, especially 1017 mandates, they counted everybody in the teacher to per pupil ratio. So counselors were in there, media specialists were in there. So it made it look like they had a low teacher to student ratio. So then we take them out to get really clear numbers on that and mark them as non-instructional. And so there's always those kind of issues there. And also, you know, all the extra supports we've had to put in place because of high-stakes testing, because of high-stakes evaluations, whether it's helping teachers understand, you know, TLE or help create data and disaggregate data. We've had, but those have a direct impact of support to our classrooms. So it's almost like a catch-22 sometimes.
It's kind of used against you either way.
Right. And Alicia brought up a good point about the federal mandates. You know, there's always that goal to have special ed funded at 40%. I think currently it might be 18%. So in reality, that means for every dollar you spend, you get reimbursed 18 cents for a district. And the hard part, especially for our rural districts, is in order, that is something you have to claim. You have to spend it first to claim it. And so it puts right now in the midst of budget cuts and lack of reserves, that puts districts in a very difficult position. So that's a good point that you brought that up.
So really what I would like everyone to do is, if you have, these are the issues again. Testing, funding, too much paperwork, lack of counselors. We can add in there media specialists. This was just a quick overview. Expectations beyond teaching, and respect. And really think about the mandates, whether they're district issues, state issues, or federal issues. And what issues go with each of those? What mandates go with each of those? And then can you get that? Can you write that up and get it back? Email it to me by this time next Monday.
Yeah, I can do that.
Is that reasonable for everyone?
I think so, yes.
Can you email us this stuff? Because I'm holding a sick baby in my hands and I don't have any extra hands.
Absolutely. Catherine's been taking notes,
Okay.
and we'll kind of set up the notes in a format that will look like what we kind of want back on the other issues.
Okay.
Listing out local, state, and federal, and we'll get those out to you by noon tomorrow.
Okay.
By the time you get out of school tomorrow, it'll be in your inbox.
Thank you.
Okay?
That'd be
No,
great.
I thank you guys. Thank you for taking the time to call in, even with the technology snafus and issues, sticking with it and calling in and putting the time to get this done. We have to have these kinds of talking out activities to really drive down and delve into what mandates are causing some of our issues so we can get that information back to our legislators, which is what drove us having this task force in the first place.
This is Jay Paul. To make the net as wide as possible, because it looks to me like, again, we're asking slightly different or more pointed questions than before. What's the chances of sending it back out to the entire board and say, do a quick survey, and are there any things that you would populate it with? Because the first time I went through and surveyed people, I just asked teachers. These are more specific questions, and some of them look like they're more on the administrative side than just simply the teachers I talked to the first time through.
Well, absolutely. If you think it's a good idea to go talk to administrators about mandates and stuff, we would, I think that would be a good resource. But I don't think we have the turnaround time to send out for all of our board to get information back.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I mean, we're trying to do this. Yeah. We're trying to get this done quickly so we can get information back on a deadline to our House leadership, which is really who asked for it.
Okay.
Also, I was trying to think, J. Paul, if there was, we have Mandy Ramey's documents that she mailed in, and so we'll have Maureen tomorrow get those scanned, and we'll get them up on the Google Drive so you can at least look through those, that if there's anything that you saw in there. And all those documents that Katie emailed out, I've put them on the Google Drive, so they're there too.
Yeah, all the Google Drive and everything will come out to you tomorrow.
Okay.
Okay, does that work?
That works.
Okay,
That works
thank
for
you
me.
guys.
Thanks.
We'll talk to you again soon.
Bye-bye.
All right, bye.
Bye.
Okay, bye.